To test gravity, two schoolboys drop bricks from a tall building. This absurd act ultimately kills an innocent boy on the spot. Yet after hearing the full account, the judge rules them not guilty. Under South Korea's Juvenile Act, minors under the age of 14 bear no criminal responsibility. As a result, the trial lasts only 3 minutes, and the two demons walk free. Even more chilling, they show no remorse at all, even smiling smugly in front of the victim's parents. The father swallows his grief and quietly comforts his collapsing wife. That's just how the law is. Judicial leniency is meant to protect children, but when mercy turns into indulgence, does it really teach them to repent? The answer is obvious. 5 years later, the same two demons commit another unforgivable crime. They get a girl drunk and take her to an abandoned construction site. Later, they team up with 2 other minors and do something terrible to her. Not until the next morning does a passing worker discover the girl lying naked on the ground, her body covered in injuries. He immediately calls an ambulance, and she barely survives. Because she was forced to drink alcohol laced with sedatives, Seon-ah now remembers almost nothing about the incident, only vaguely recalling that there seem to have been 3 attackers. Before the case makes any progress, her personal information is inexplicably leaked online and spreads like wildfire. A tidal wave of vicious insults and humiliation follows, all directed at the victim herself. Driven to despair, Seon-ah nearly takes her own life. Fortunately, the tragedy is narrowly averted. Consumed by rage and pain, her father confronts the mastermind behind it all. In-jun shows no remorse. Instead, he shamelessly claims they had Seon-ah's consent and even thoughtfully chose a secluded location. He goes on to describe how they decided the order by rock, paper, scissors, detailing how the first 2 accomplices abused Seon-ah. But when it was his turn, he was too drunk to do anything, and this makes him deeply regretful. In-jun then laughs provocatively and says, "Maybe you don't know how that feels since she's your daughter." Seon-ah's father completely breaks down and viciously beats In-jun. Yet afterward, the one who is arrested is the father himself for assaulting a minor. Ironically, the recording is not admitted as evidence because prosecutors conclude that In-jun is forced to confess. The case is ultimately assigned to Judge Sim. However, the moment she sees In-jun's profile, she struggles to breathe and collapses on the spot. Because 5 years ago, this very minor was the one who killed her son. After that outrageously absurd trial, Sim made up her mind to become a juvenile judge, determined to do everything she can to protect every victim. Now, fate brings this demon back before her once again, and her fighting spirit is fully ignited. Sim immediately returns to court and takes a deeper look into the case. According to In-jun's testimony, he believes it is nothing more than a casual drinking gathering and claims he never anticipates things spiraling so far out of control. He insists that he did not take part in the bullying of Seon-ah. Instead, he claims he tried to stop the other 2 and is beaten for it. The forensic report further shows that only the other 2 perpetrators' DNA is found on Seon-ah, and both of them quickly confess. For this reason, In-jun's testimony appears especially credible. However, Sim remains deeply skeptical. She plans to investigate the truth quietly, but her ex-husband suddenly shows up and demands that she immediately recuse herself from the case. He argues that she is a direct relative of a victim in a previous case. Sim ignores his words, telling him it has nothing to do with him and warning him to stop interfering in her life. Her ex-husband tries to persuade her to let go of revenge, saying that in the end, the only one who will get hurt is herself. But Sim refuses to compromise and states firmly, no matter what, she will make that demon pay the price he deserves. 3 days later, the trial formally begins. Beyond repeating his earlier testimony, In-jun now claims that he is coerced by his accomplices for a long time and is forced to participate in the crime. The defense lawyer follows up, explaining that the 2 suspects have been making In-jun buy alcohol and cigarettes for a long time, and if he refused, they would beat him. She also submits photos of injuries on In-jun's body as evidence. Sim, however, keenly notices the contradictions in In-jun's statements. She counters, "You were loyal to them because you were afraid of them. Then why, on the very night of the incident, did you dare to step forward and stop them?" In-jun freezes on the spot. Sim presses on, "You did everything they asked because you were afraid of them. So how did you refuse this time? As the lawyer prepares to explain, Injun suddenly chokes up and says, "Because it was preposterous. I just couldn't see how anyone could do such a thing to another human being." Sim isn't deceived by his seemingly innocent face. More than anyone, she knows exactly how terrifying the person standing before her is. She gives Injun one final chance, ordering him to tell the whole truth or face the harshest judgment. But Injun continues to deny everything. Sim immediately summons a witness, the detective in charge of the case. 3 days earlier, the two of them met privately. At that time, Sim suspected there may be crucial evidence beyond DNA, so she went alone to the crime scene late at night to investigate. There, she unexpectedly discovered that the construction site foreman parked his vehicle at the site every night, and his dash cam recorded the entire incident that night. The video clearly shows all 3 teenagers took part in doing something awful to Seon-ah, proving that Injun is not a so-called coerced participant. The defense lawyer still attempts to deny the authenticity of the footage. The detective immediately presents a professional analysis report, confirming that the video shows no signs of editing or tampering. In the end, citing Injun's false testimony in court, Sim rules on the spot that he is a co-perpetrator and transfers the case to the Juvenile Criminal Court for reinvestigation. She also issues a stern warning. If Injun makes false statements again during the next trial, this case can be sent to the prosecution. However, just as Sim steps down from the bench, her colleague Tae-ju rushes over with a crucial lead. In another case, he discovers that there are not only 3 people involved in bullying Seon-ah, there is another teenager, Do-hyeon. Sim is stunned, because this Do-hyeon is the other demon who killed her son 5 years ago. At that moment, a woman suddenly rushes forward and slaps Sim hard across the face. Gritting her teeth, she snarls, "I warned you. I told you I would find you." The woman is Sim's former mother-in-law. She angrily accuses Sim of constantly clinging to her son, claiming it is Sim's fault that his new girlfriend breaks up with him. She even blames Sim entirely for her grandson's death, saying that the tragedy happened because Sim refused to quit her job and insists on leaving the child in someone else's care. Sim offers no explanation. She stumbles into the stairwell, collapsing in tears as she breaks down alone. Late at night, she drags her exhausted body home, only to find her ex-husband waiting downstairs, his face filled with remorse. But she refuses to speak to him. Their son's death is a wound that will never heal for either of them. They simply choose completely different ways to face it. Her ex-husband wants to let go of the past, while Sim wants juvenile offenders to understand one thing clearly. Every evil act comes with a price. The next day, Chief Judge Gun-hee receives a file. Inside is a motion for recusal submitted by Injun's attorney. Only then does she recall that the legal guardian of the victim in the case from 5 years ago is Sim. Gun-hee immediately summons Sim for questioning and states bluntly that her ruling back then was not wrong and any judge would have made the same decision. Sim refuses to back down. She points out that a trial wrapped up in just 3 minutes never achieved anything. Those 2 boys learned nothing from it. They only walked away believing the law is weak and meaningless. Such an irresponsible ruling not only destroyed one family, but allowed more innocent people to suffer today. Gun-hee clenches her fists, because she feels offended when her subordinate points out her mistake to her face. She then orders Sim to withdraw immediately from all proceedings related to the case. But Sim won't let it end like this. Looking at the helpless Seon-ah, she sees her own son all over again. She will never allow that absurd judgment to happen a second time. Back in her office, Sim presses Tae-ju on how he identifies the 4th perpetrator. Tae-ju explains that the lead comes from a victim in another case. According to the girl's testimony, Injun and Do-hyun run a criminal ring that manipulates and exploits several runaway girls. They force the girls to lure and deceive predatory men and profit from it. Hearing this, Sim feels a deep fear for what lies ahead for these teenagers. She secretly visits several girls who narrowly escape and gradually pieces together an even more horrifying truth. The group not only record the girls' private videos and sells them illegally, but also force the victims into prostitution. Based on the girls' clues, Sim goes alone to Do-hyun's residence, attempting to retrieve all the criminal evidence stored on his computer. At that moment, Do-hyun suddenly appears and sneers that there is nothing on it. The next second, he attacks Sim without hesitation, demanding to know where she gets the nerve to mess with him. Sim roars, "You should have lived right since you were given a chance." Do-hyun ignores her completely and even swings a knife at her. During the struggle, they stumble into a hidden room. Sim looks up and sees Seon-ah's missing shoe and instantly realizes that Do-hyun is also a co-conspirator. The display case is filled with shoes, each one clearly representing a girl who once suffered abuse. Do-hyun looks at her and says provocatively, "You can't do anything to me, can you?" Just as Sim's life hangs by a thread, police sirens suddenly wail outside, and Do-hyun flees in panic. It turns out that, just in case, Sim has already contacted the detective in charge of the case. Despite her severe injuries, she does not go to the hospital. Instead, she returns immediately to the court to report all of Do-hyun's crimes. Yet Gun-hee remains stubborn, repeatedly interrupting Sim's account and warning her to stay out of the case. After Sim leaves, however, Gun-hee falls into deep thought, beginning to question whether her way of judging cases has been wrong all along. Soon after, the case officially goes to trial. The defense lawyer shamelessly continues to argue for In-jun, claiming that since no DNA trace of him is found in Seon-ah's body, there is no proof of his crime. She even presents a forged model student certificate, trying to paint In-jun as a well-behaved kid who is coerced and misled. Next, Do-hyun takes the stand and shifts all the blame onto the other two boys. Just as they assume Gun-hee will wrap up the case as hastily as she did 5 years ago, she points out clear contradictions between Do-hyun's testimony and the statements given by the two boys in detention, and plays an audio recording in court. Not long before this, Tae-ju presented photographic evidence collected by the police and warned them that this was their last chance to confess. Otherwise, they would face prison sentences of more than 10 years. Under overwhelming pressure, the two boys finally confessed to everything they had done. Even so, the defense lawyer continues to push back, insisting that these confessions are one-sided and that there is still no direct evidence proving Do-hyun and In-jun are accomplices. Hearing this, Gun-hee immediately presents decisive evidence. After every crime, the boys would take photos with their victim, treating them like trophies. Do-hyun is stunned. He personally smashed the secret phone himself, convinced the evidence was gone. What he never expects is that the other two boys have already backed up all the photos. They are long fed up with Do-hyun's arrogance and controlling behavior and seize this chance to completely bring him down. As the situation rapidly turns, In-jun immediately changes his story and claims that everything is done under Do-hyun's orders. The two erupt into a fight in court, exposing every crime amid their shouting and accusations. Gun-hee then gives the remaining time to the victim, allowing her to say everything she wants, leaving no regrets behind. In truth, Seon-ah never wanted to testify. Her life can never return to what it once is, and she does not even know how to move forward. Sim firmly tells Seon-ah that none of this is her fault. The ones at fault are the perpetrators and the online mobs who sit behind keyboards and pass judgment without restraint. She urges Seon-ah to lift her head and face those who hurt her, openly and with dignity. In the end, Seon-ah grips the microphone tightly and says through trembling lips, "Please turn my life back to the way it was." Her sobs echo through the courtroom, moving everyone present. Then, Gun-hee delivers her final ruling. All 4 boys are identified as principal offenders, and the entire case is sent back to the prosecution for reinvestigation. Before adjournment, Gun-hee admits that she once believes that, as a judge, she must set aside her personal feelings in the courtroom to maintain absolute fairness and rationality. But now, she finally understands that, at least in juvenile court, she should not be so cold. As an adult, she offers a solemn apology to everyone who has been hurt because of her. That night, Sim returns home and finally gathers the courage to open the storage box containing her son's belongings. She gently touches each item, and the tears she has suppressed for so long finally spill over, as if silently telling her son that she has finally done it. She gazes at her son's photo one last time, then takes his belongings to the memorial, letting the flames carry her grief away. From now on, Sim is no longer bound by the past, and devotes herself fully to judging juvenile crimes. Soon, she takes on a case that shocks the entire nation, A 13-year-old boy lures an 8-year-old into his home, brutally murders him, and dismembers the body. Even more shocking, after the crime, the boy voluntarily goes to the police and turns himself in. The detective can hardly believe the confession, until the boy pulls out a blood-stained axe on the spot. Police immediately discover the body on the rooftop and arrest him. The suspect, named Bayek, lives in the same apartment complex as the victim. However, the investigation reveals that he had no prior conflict with the boy and didn't even know him, making it appear to be a random killing. Since Bayek is under 14, he is exempt from criminal liability under Korea's Juvenile Protection Act. The worst he can face is 2 years in a reformatory for education and guidance. Once the case becomes public, social outrage spirals out of control. Protesters flood the streets, demanding the abolition of juvenile protection laws and severe punishment for the killer. Judge Sim digs deeper into Bayek's background and discovers that he dropped out shortly after entering middle school and had a history of repeatedly injuring others. He grows up in a single-parent household and is diagnosed with severe schizophrenia, requiring long-term medication to remain lucid. This diagnosis may well become his key defense to avoid criminal liability. As expected, Beck testifies in court that even though he took his medication on the day of the incident, the auditory hallucinations remained severe. He claims the victim asked to borrow his phone to make a call, and he used that as a reason to bring the boy back to his home. Once they arrive, his symptoms gradually eased, and he initially planned to walk the boy back. But when the boy saw the game console and refused to leave, pestering him non-stop, and it triggers his auditory hallucinations again, he lost control in an instant and ended the boy's life in a fit of rage. While recounting the crime, Beck suddenly bursts into laughter and asks the judge, "I heard kids under 14 don't go to prison even if they kill people. Is that true?" His provocative, remorseless attitude sends a chill through everyone in the courtroom. After the first trial ends, Bayek's mother finally appears at court in a panic. She cites the Juvenile Protection Act and demands leniency. Sim offers no response and simply tells her to formally apologize to the victim's parents first. Not long after, the victim's mother arrives at the courthouse. Seeing her struggle to hold back her grief, even Sim's eyes begin to redden. The mother asks for no compensation. She only wants the killer to receive the punishment he deserves. Knowing judges do not accept gifts, she leaves behind a bento box, her son's favorite meal. That night, Sim eats the bento. At that moment, the weight of her responsibility feels heavier than ever before. The next day, the trial resumes. Faced with the judge's questions, Beck grows visibly impatient and submits medical records in court, claiming he suffers from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and anxiety. After reading them, Sim lets out a cold laugh and asks, "You didn't do it, did you?" In fact, she uncovered multiple inconsistencies the night before. Generally, patients with schizophrenia cannot sustain long-term intense focus, let alone carry out such complex actions after committing murder. Yet Beck not only cleaned the crime scene, but disposed of the body with extreme thoroughness. More importantly, he skillfully exploited juvenile protection laws to create a legal safe zone for himself. There is only one explanation. The real killer has already colluded with him and arranged for Bayek to take the fall. And this is not mere speculation. Sim also retrieved the elevator surveillance footage from the day of the crime and clearly saw the real killer's face. It is not Bayek, but a girl named Han. At this revelation, Bayek completely loses control and shouts, "Not her! She has nothing to do with this." His reaction only confirms Sim's conclusion. The court then obtains Bayek's phone records as supplementary evidence. The data shows that before the murder, he and Han spoke on the phone frequently, with unusually close contact. At the same time, Taiju learns from the detective that when Bayek turned himself in, he repeatedly looked back in panic toward a specific direction. Standing there is none other than Han. To catch the suspect, Taiju first tracks down Han's classmates and learns that she spends nearly every night at an internet cafe. Once Sim gets the information, she moves immediately. Unexpectedly, Beck's mother risks her life to block Sim's car, desperately begging her to spare her son. Sim feels no sympathy. If criminals can escape justice through pleading or threats, then everything she does becomes meaningless. Refusing to argue further, she steps on the gas and drives away. Soon, Sim arrives at the internet cafe and successfully locks onto the suspect. Sensing danger, Han tries to flee, only to panic and run straight into a dead end. Soon after, her defense lawyer rushes to the courthouse. It turns out Han's parents have lived in the United States for years and barely involved themselves in her life. As expected, troubled youths often come from deeply negligent families. Faced with Sim's piercing interrogation, Han maintains an innocent expression and says nothing. Her lawyer has already instructed her to exercise her right to remain silent. Seeing this, Sim presents her call records with Bayek and plays the surveillance footage from the day of the incident. She then walks over to Han and whispers, "Guess what Bayek said after the trial?" That single line finally cracks Han's psychological defenses. Sim presses on, asking why Han was at the crime scene in the first place. Han naively shoots back, "I just got on an elevator with him. Is that a crime?" Hearing this, Sim becomes even more convinced that Han is not innocent, but an accomplice. However, with the evidence not yet fully confirmed, Sim can only detain Han on the charge of a minor staying at an internet cafe late at night. The incident quickly reaches her superior, Judge Kang. He explodes with anger and berates Sim for unlawfully detaining a minor. Sim doesn't think she's wrong and angrily fires back, "The court should at least find out the truth. Isn't that why we're here? If teenagers ignore the law, they will only grow more ruthless as adults and hurt more innocent people. They must learn that there are consequences when they harm others." Faced with this rational argument, Kang is left momentarily speechless. But the matter does not end there. Han's lawyer leaks the story to the media, accusing Sim of forcibly detaining a minor and harboring deep prejudice against juvenile offenders. Once the news breaks, Kang is furious yet again. The negative report not only damages the court's reputation, but also shakes public trust in the justice system. To uncover the truth as quickly as possible, Tae-ju visits Bayek's mother and reveals that there was actually a third person present at the scene that day. He promises that if she can persuade Bayek to tell the truth, there may be a chance for a reduced sentence. Seeing a final glimmer of hope, Bayek's mother agrees without hesitation. Before long, the trial formally begins. Han admits to murdering and abandoning the body, but insists it was not premeditated, claiming it was manslaughter by reason of insanity. But Bayek doesn't admit to being an accomplice, admitting he only abetted the murder. He argues that before the incident, he thought this whole ordeal was a joke. All of this is exactly as Sim expected, and she's already prepared for it. Tae-ju presents a chat log showing that on the day of the crime, Han asked Bayek for his home address, but Bayek replied, "Is he alive? Did you check the CCTV?" It becomes clear that the person who lures the victim to the crime scene is not Bayek, but Han, and they conspire to commit the crime. Seeing this, the defense lawyer immediately calls Han's attending physician to testify. The doctor states that Han suffers from severe persecutory delusions, has extremely unstable emotions, and can lose control even under minor stimulation. This makes her criminal motive difficult to define. As for whether she was experiencing a delusional episode at the time of the crime, it still cannot be determined. During a recess, Sim proposes a bold strategy: pit Bayek against Han and make them expose the truth about each other. During the following trial, Sim sets a trap through a series of sharp questions. Han eventually confesses that Bayek stood outside the bathroom, instructing her step by step on how to clean the scene and dispose of the body. Bayek completely breaks down and shouts uncontrollably, "She did it herself!" He even accuses Han of dancing around in excitement after the murder. The two erupt into a fierce confrontation, spilling every detail of that day. Overwhelmed with pain, the victim's mother suddenly shouts, begging them to stop. Whether it's paranoia or schizophrenia, she doesn't care. All she wants to know is why her innocent child suffered such a painful death. She pleads with the judges to punish the killers severely and never allow such a tragedy to happen again. After deliberation, Kang ultimately adopts Sim's recommendation. Han is sentenced to 20 years in prison, while Bayek is sent to a juvenile facility for 2 years. Han completely loses control, screaming hysterically in the courtroom and repeatedly insisting she is innocent. Everyone understands that children like her may never truly change, but at the very least, the court fulfills its duty. If parents were to properly guide their children, many of these heartbreaking tragedies might never happen. Before the crime, the victim once asked Han for help, begging to call her mother. The moment Han heard the word "mom," her expression turns dark and terrifying. There appeared to be an unspeakable past between her and her mother. That long-suppressed hatred ultimately drove her to commit the crime. After the verdict, Bayek's mother furiously confronts Tae-ju, demanding to know why her son cannot be released when he did not kill anyone. Sim responds coldly and firmly, "Because the child died in your house. Your son not only failed to call the police, he even helped Han cover up the crime, so he must bear responsibility. Because of Bayek's choice, one mother loses her child forever, and who is supposed to answer for her pain?" Those words completely break Baek's mother. Only after returning home and seeing the bloodstains on the floor does she truly realize that her son has committed an unforgivable crime. Guilt finally consumes her. The case comes to an end, but it is not really over yet. No one can guarantee whether these juvenile offenders will truly repent or go on to harm others again in the future. Late at night, a car speeds wildly through the streets. Several teenagers drive without licenses and accidentally hit a delivery man. Both the victim and the driver are severely injured and remain in a coma. As Sim reviews the file, she discovers that the driver is Do Seok, who previously served time in a juvenile facility. Tae-ju has always shown special concern for troubled youths like them and maintains close relationships with them. He repeatedly pleads on Do Seok's behalf, insisting that Do Seok would never intentionally hurt anyone. But Sim remains impartial, judging everyone strictly by the facts. The next day, she summons the other minors who were in the car to testify. Unexpectedly, their statements are almost identical. They all claim that Do Seok forced them to get into the car. Sim then presents a petition. In it, Do Seok's mother claims that the real mastermind is a boy named Nam, and that Do Seok was forced to take the driver's seat. With both sides contradicting each other and shifting blame, the case reaches a deadlock. Afterward, Do Seok's mother shows Sim the online post published by the 4 minors before the trial. The photos are filled with provocation and show no remorse whatsoever. She also points out that Do Seok's body is covered in bruises from beatings, clear evidence, in her view, that the other kids are lying. Then even worse, news arrives. Do Seok's condition suddenly deteriorates, and the hospital declares him to be in a vegetative state. The outcome completely devastates Tae-ju. He did everything he could to help Do Seok get back on the right path, but in the end, things didn't go as he hoped. Sim is equally shaken and quietly resolves to uncover the truth at all costs. The investigation shows that shortly after his release, Do Seok behaved well and strictly followed supervision. But 2 months later, he began to go missing frequently and repeatedly skipped educational programs. In addition, Do Seok is physically large and trained in Taekwondo, so in theory, he should not be someone who was constantly bullied. The case once again stalls. At this moment, Tae-ju brings back a crucial lead from a car rental agency. The clerk recalls that when Do Seok came to rent the car that day, he was accompanied by a girl, likely one of the passengers in the car. The next day, the court receives a USB drive from a girl. The footage clearly recorded the entire process of Do Seok being bullied by Nam. On the day of the trial, Sim plays the video in front of Nam. The boy who once claims to be the victim is left completely speechless. Sim then calls another suspect, Mi-ju, the girl who delivered the USB drive. To uncover the truth, Sim suspends the court's live recording. This means Mi-ju's upcoming testimony carries no legal effect and will not be disclosed to her friends. After a brief hesitation, Mi-ju finally tells the truth. It turns out those delinquents once invited her to join an overnight trip to the beach, but secretly took private photos of her. To keep the photos from being exposed, she did everything they tell her to, living each day in fear and misery. After learning what she's been through, Do Seok decides to help her delete the photos. That is why he was ultimately forced to join Nam's group. However, while this testimony proves that Do Seok was coerced, it doesn't change the fact that he drove the car and injured someone. Just as Sim is about to persuade Mi-ju to testify against the bullies, devastating news arrives from the hospital. The injured delivery man is confirmed dead. The nature of the case immediately escalates and is officially reclassified as a juvenile criminal case. Do Seok will be convicted, and his family will also bear civil liability for compensation. Sim wants to continue pursuing responsibility from Nam and his accomplices, but Gyeon-hee firmly stops her. She points out that there is no solid evidence, and the opposing side has already hired a top-tier legal team. Continuing the fight would only waste judicial resources. At the next hearing, Gyeon-hee announces on the spot that the remaining 4 minors are all found not guilty. The children cheer with relief, while the delivery man's wife and Do Seok's mother break down in tears. Sim delivers her final statement. At the moment of the crash, Do Seok violently turned the steering wheel toward himself, receiving the full impact so the others in the car could survive. So you should at least know, regardless of the results of the trial, how many lives you've sacrificed to be standing here today. After leaving the courthouse, Miju finally breaks down and bursts into tears. Whether Sim's words truly awaken these teenagers' consciences, no one knows. The only certainty is that the victim's family will carry the pain of this tragedy for the rest of their lives. Before the end of the workday, Taiju receives a package. Inside is a book he once lent to Do Seok. Seeing the notes and markings inside, he realizes that Do Seok truly wanted to change and once genuinely hoped for a better future. Yet at this very moment, Do Seok lies in a hospital bed, never able to wake up again. The cruelty of reality is suffocating. Sim feels the same helplessness. But this is the law. It cannot protect everyone, not even the victims. The next day, the court suddenly receives a tip accusing the director of a juvenile care center of embezzling donated funds and long-term abuse of juvenile offenders. Once assigned to the case, the judges immediately head to the center to investigate. Multiple girls unanimously identify the director, Ms. O, as a complete devil. At every meal, she forced them to eat spoiled rice while preparing fresh food only for her own daughter. Anyone who dared to complain was met with vicious insults. In addition, Ms. O forced the girls to do housework for local villagers to profit for herself. If they refused, she would starve them. One girl once talked back to her and ended up with broken bones. She's still in the hospital. After grasping the basic facts, the judges begin a full audit of the center's financial records. Meanwhile, Ms. O sits alone in the living room, visibly tense. That night, the judges formally question Ms. O about the allegations of abuse. Her account, however, completely contradicts the girl's testimony. She insists that she always did her utmost to care for the children, but they're too rebellious, even demanding to smoke during meals. When she refused, they cursed at her and deliberately smashed the dishes. She couldn't control them, so she just cleaned up in silence. As for the accusation that she forced the girls to work outside, Ms. O offers a different explanation. When the center was first established, nearby villagers strongly opposed it, believing juvenile offenders should not exist within the community. To ease tensions and reduce prejudice, she organized the girls to help with household chores and participate in regular group activities. But the troubled girls refused to change and even continued to bully those who sincerely wanted to make amends. In fact, Sim already knows that the girls were lying. During the day, she called the hospital and learned that the injured girl testified to the police that she was assaulted by a mob of girls her age. Then Sim questions Ms. O about whether she uses donated funds for personal reasons. Ms. O does not answer. She only promises to repay the money as soon as possible. Sim feels deeply disappointed, realizing that, as always, people can't resist the temptation of money. She takes all the related files and prepares to officially file a case in court. Later that night, the judges go to the hospital to visit the injured girl. The girl hurriedly explains that Ms. O took the donation money to help pay for her medical bills. She says that in the center she felt the warmth of a home for the first time, and truly saw Ms. O as a mother. So she begs them to let this slide just once and promises that she will work and pay the money back. After hearing the truth, Sim is filled with guilt. She immediately returns to the center to apologize to Ms. O, but she finds the place in complete chaos. Only Ms. O's daughter, Rome, is left there alone. It turns out that before leaving, Sim had warned her that the juvenile care center might be shut down. The news devastated Ms. O. She collapsed on the spot and was rushed to the hospital. After overhearing the girls bad-mouthing her mother, Arum completely lost control. She smashed everything in the house and forced them out. Back in the present, Ah-room breaks down in tears, saying it was her mother's obsession with those girls that drove her father away. She also can't stand the way her mother always ignored her and her sister. Hearing this, Sim suddenly realizes that the person who calls the court to report the center is very likely Ah-room. Not long after, Ms. O returns from the hospital and stares in disbelief at the destroyed house. When she learns what her daughter has done, she angrily slaps Ah-room. But Ah-room never regrets her decision. She sees with her own eyes how her mother sacrificed everything for these troubled girls, only to be falsely accused in the end. Sim immediately stops the argument and reminds them that the most urgent task now is to find the runaway girls as soon as possible. At that moment, the police call and report that they find one runaway girl by the roadside. The girl says that after she got injured and couldn't walk, the leader, Nana, abandoned her and took her money. It is already late at night. After Ms. O brings the girl home, she decides to pause the search and wait until morning. However, not long after, they receive another distress call. Another runaway girl cries on the phone, saying that Nana forces them to sleep with strange men to make money. She reveals that they have reached Seoul and are hiding in a motel near Seoul Station. After hearing this, Sim's team immediately begins searching the streets of Seoul. Meanwhile, the girl is locked inside a room, while Nana keeps watch downstairs. Just as the girl tries to escape, a man suddenly breaks into the room and locks the door behind him. Elsewhere, Ms. O finds the other two girls and tries to persuade them to come back, but the girls refuse to be locked in the center again and turn to run away. At the critical moment, Taeju appears and stops them. He then learns the exact location of the motel from them. Inside the motel, the girl is beaten for resisting. She holds a piece of broken glass and warns the man to stay away. At the last second, the police break down the door and arrest the man on the spot. In the end, all the other girls are rescued, except Nana, who disappears without a trace. At this moment, Ah-room gives a key clue. Last night, the girl was caught by Nana when she called. To protect her, Ah-room grabbed the phone and threatened Nana. Knowing how much Nana loves her mother, Ah-room told her that her mother was seriously ill and urged her to go home. After hearing the news, Sim guesses that Nana probably went to find her mother and rushes to find her. But when they arrive, Nana is sitting alone on the stairs, covered in blood and in terrible condition. It turns out that Nana rushed home, only to find that her mother wasn't sick at all. She had a new lover. Her mother looked at her with disgust and shut the door in her face. Losing control, Nana banged on the door wildly and tried to force her way inside. However, her mother only watched coldly as the lover beat Nana and never said a word. After hearing everything, Ms. O hugs Nana tightly, her heart breaking. She understands that many juvenile offenders come from broken families and can only release their pain in extreme ways. That is why she does everything she can to care for every child, hoping to heal their wounded hearts. But Sim reminds her that while she is caring for other people's children, her own daughter is also suffering deeply. It turns out that it was indeed Ah-room who reported the center. She also used this extreme act to get attention, hoping her mother would not ignore her. Only then does Ms. O realize that while trying to be a good juvenile counselor, she neglects her duty as a mother. Luckily, it is not too late. She still has time to make things right. The next day, Sim delivers the court's verdict. Each of the girls is given a different level of punishment and will serve time at a reformatory. Since the root of juvenile crime often lies in family problems, Sim also rules that all guardians must receive mandatory guardian education, especially Nana's mother. At the end of the hearing, she solemnly warns all guardians to pay closer attention to how their children live, because no child can grow up alone. The courtroom falls into silence, and guilt shows on many faces, yet no one knows whether this regret comes from fear of the law or from true reflection. After the trial, the court chief suddenly calls Judge Kang into his office and informs him of an extremely difficult group case. Exam papers were leaked at a top high school, and the case involves a special club called Descartes, whose members' parents rank in the top 3% of wealth and status. Since Kong's children attend the same school, the chief wants to confirm whether he has any connection to the case. Kang admits that he once received an invitation from the club, but clearly refused to join from the very beginning. The chief nods in approval and decides to hand the case fully to Kang. Kang then states that after the case ends, he will resign from his position and formally enter politics. He has long dreamed of pushing reform of juvenile law, but she can only make it happen by becoming a member of the National Assembly. However, on his way home, he suddenly receives a call from his eldest son, Sin-yu. The police show up at their door. Even more shocking, Sin-yu turns out to be involved in the exam leak as well. This sudden twist freezes Kang on the spot. Thinking of the promise he made to the chief just moments ago, he burns with anger and rushes home at once. Fortunately, the police were there for a nearby traffic accident. Kang smashes a flower pot in rage and demands to know why Sin-yu disobeyed his orders. His wife hurriedly explains that it was just once, and Sin-yu dropped out of the club right away. She insists that only the teaching director knows the list, so as long as they stay quiet, the matter will eventually pass. But Kang roars in despair, "I'm in charge of that case. The whole country is focused on this case, and I can't let the people involved get off easy." He never imagined that the final trial of his life would turn into such a catastrophe. The next day, TV news widely reports that Kang is about to leave the justice system and enter politics. Sin-yu plans to go to the police and turn himself in, but he hesitates at the last moment. He is afraid that this choice will completely ruin his father's political future. That night, a congressman warns Kang to properly handle the final case in order to gain the people's trust. But right after the meeting ends, the police call. Sin-yu suddenly ran into the road at a red light and got hit by a car, suffering severe injuries. Overwhelming guilt crushes Kang. Just that morning, he scolded his son and told him to die outside and not drag anyone down. His wife breaks down and blames him, saying all of this is his fault. For many years, Kang constantly compared Sin-yu to the younger son who got better grades, always belittling him and calling him stupid. To earn his father's approval, Sin-yu studied desperately, but he never saw any progress. Long-term failure put him under extreme pressure. He slept only 3 hours a day and even relied on sleeping pills to fall asleep. His wife continues, saying she was the one who persuaded Sin-yu to join that club. But after attending only once, Sin-yu felt guilty and said he wanted to quit. She says directly that her husband forces the children to study non-stop, only for his own career and ambition. She begs him to let go and let their children live the lives they want, instead of struggling in pain. After reading the text messages Sin-yu once sent him, Kang finally realizes that he has always been too cold and too harsh toward his eldest son. Meanwhile, Sim is questioning a student involved in the case, and the student's homeroom teacher is also summoned to court. Under Sim's pressure, the teacher admits that the school has long turned a blind eye to these acts, just to keep its college admission rate high. As a top school, once the admission rate drops, it faces heavy pressure from parents and senior officials. The entry requirement for this club is family wealth. Teachers taking money and giving favors to rich students have long become an unspoken rule in this circle. In the eyes of elite parents, getting into college is a silent war, and no one wants their child to lose at the starting line. Sim can hardly believe it. Even the college entrance exam, which claims absolute fairness, has turned into a deal of money and power. After careful thought, Kang meets with the congressman. He admits that his son has also joined the club and says he is willing to withdraw from the election. The congressman refuses without hesitation. He warns Kang that if the truth comes out, the media will destroy both father and son, and even damage the entire justice system. He urges Kang to make the right choice, to protect his son and protect all innocent people. In the end, Kang chooses to go against the principles of being a judge. He secretly meets the school's teaching director and asks him to deny all accusations during the trial. On the day of the hearing, Kang doesn't select any witnesses from the prosecution, only from the defense. This abnormal move immediately raises Sim's suspicion. When she presses him, Kang suddenly loses control and warns her not to push too far, saying his patience has limits. Afterward, Taeju comforts Sim, saying Kang used to be famous for being extremely strict in his judgments, and that he is absolutely a judge with a strong sense of justice. But Sim still cannot understand why he makes this choice this time. In the later court hearings, one student reveals that he once heard the teaching director say there were 24 students involved in the exam leak, but the list released now shows only 21. Sim suspects the 3 hidden students are likely children of politicians or the elite, or even top-scoring students. Earlier, a parent openly said, "The kids get the exam papers not because their grades are poor, but because it gives them time to focus on other things." Following this lead, the judges narrow the list down to 6 students who fit the profile. Sim suddenly recognizes one boy's face. She has seen him before in Kang's family photo. Combined with Kang's strange behavior in court, she becomes certain that one of the 3 hidden students is Kang's son. That night, Sim and Taeju go to the hospital and clearly states her conclusion. Seeing the panic on Kang and his wife's faces, she becomes even more confident and urges Kang to turn himself in. However, the trial still goes on as planned. Kang ignores the key witnesses submitted by the prosecution and tries to close the case quickly. Watching this absurd scene, Sim oversteps her authority and declares a recess on the spot. Back in her office, Kang explodes in anger over her actions. But Sim does not back down and decides to report his son's condition to the chief. Kang insists she has no solid evidence and threatens her, saying that if she accuses him based only on guesses, he will strike back by any means. Soon after, the high school allows students involved in exam paper leak to drop out. This means their extracurricular grades are still intact, and the case will almost not affect their future at all. However, the truly innocent students must face sudden retests and compete with each other in an even harsher environment just to get on top. Sim is furious. These children's futures are being trampled on by the selfishness of adults. Just as she struggles to find decisive evidence, the case takes a turn. Sin-Yu wakes up in the hospital. Sim tries to persuade him to confess, but Sin-Yu believes doing so would betray his father. She patiently tells him that everyone makes mistakes, but what truly matters is how one deals with them, because that choice decides what kind of person he will become. In the end, Sin-Yu confesses everything. Sim immediately reports it to the chief. Kang panics and has no idea how to defend himself. The chief faces a dilemma and says he needs one day to think of a solution. Afterward, Sim has a long talk with Kang. She knows that, at heart, he is a good judge. For the past 5 years, he has worked to revise the juvenile law, hoping society will show less prejudice toward minors. He enters politics for the same reason, to make that reform real. Even so, Sim cannot accept that he chooses to achieve his ideals by sacrificing the future of innocent children. In the end, driven by justice, Kang walks into the courtroom with his son and confesses everything. All students involved receive the punishment they deserve. After the trial ends, Kang packs up his things and leaves the courthouse in silence. Taeju catches up and accompanying Kang for a final walk. He reveals that he used to be at a reformatory, but a kind judge once helped him turn his life around. He then takes out an old photo and the judge in it turns out to be Kang. Taeju goes on to say that he worked hard to become a judge so he could stand by Kang's side and repay his kindness. Kang smiles and says, "I recognized you the moment I saw you. I'm grateful you've grown into such an outstanding man." Taeju bends down and ties Kang's shoelaces, just like Kang once did for him. He says with deep gratitude, "Thank you for scolding me back then and for taking my side." Kang says solemnly, "Don't ever follow in my footsteps." After that, he leaves without looking back. Taeju bows deeply to his back in respect. That night, Sim comes to Kang's office and finds a letter he leaves for her. In the letter, he writes that he has nothing against her because she was right. He hopes she continues to be a good judge, and he hopes she finishes the work he cannot complete. And that indeed becomes the goal Sim has always pursued. Regardless of whether Korea's juvenile law is ever reformed, she vows to stay true to her principles and do her utmost to judge every young offender fairly,